Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. I recently had the glorious privilege of seeing Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel Movie 1, Presage Flower, and had a phenomenal time. For someone who dedicates so much of his channel to Fate content, my opinion is really no surprise. I could give you a review of the film, but that would be pretty silly since I'll immediately give it a legendary rank, right along with the rest of the Stay Night pantheon of anime. If you liked Ufotable's Unlimited Blade Works, then you'll definitely be pleased by their latest adaptation. So, rather than a review, I'd like to give my fresh impressions on the film, and hopefully answer a few key questions for those looking forward to seeing it. This section will remain spoiler-free, but afterward, I intend to take my gloves off and really talk about specific scenes. I will give the point of no return at that time. First, rejoice! The film is brilliant, surprisingly exceeding my already high expectations. Let's cover some of the groundwork for less informed viewers. What exactly is Heaven's Feel? Well, Fate Stay Night in its purest form is a visual novel published in 2004. It was unique for its time by not just having alternate endings depending on which girl you coveted, but by actually having 3 completely different stories, each one being a separate version of how the Fifth Holy Grail War happened. When playing the visual novel, players are locked into the first plot route, called the Fate route, that focuses on Shiro and his bond with Artoria Pendragon. On a subsequent playthrough, you're able to make a minor change and experience the Unlimited Blade Works route, which focuses on Rin Tosaka and Archer. After completing these 2 routes, you are able to play the third plot route, Heaven's Feel, which focuses on Sakura. Of the 3, it's definitely the darkest and most enlightening. Still, if this has been around since 2004, what's the hype? Well, so far, between Studio Dean and Ufotable, we've had the majority of the Fate route and 2 entirely different adaptations of Unlimited Blade Works in anime form. Each one gave us a pretty decent cinematic representation, but Heaven's Feel never got that same treatment. This leaves many dramatic and iconic scenes and developments that have yet to transcend the pictures and words of the original. With the massive success of Fate Zero, many new Fate fans are entering the fray, having never read the visual novel, and are turning to Ufotable to provide them their very first look at the most graphic and mature route in the franchise. As I mentioned before, I had pretty high expectations of this film from the get-go. Ufotable has demonstrated great care and love for the source material in how they handled Unlimited Blade Works, telling the story almost word for word at times. Yet, they also innovated the story with their unique style, adding extra scenes and fights not present in the original. Their changes are mostly additive in nature, such that one could argue that Ufotable's adaptation is the definitive version of the route. The fact that Heaven's Feel is being made into 3 entire films shows Ufotable's dedication to the lengthy source material, willing to give it the time it needs. After all, Studio Dean's adaptation of Unlimited Blade Works may have covered all of the basic plot points, but they crammed it all into a single film to the point where all the dramatic tension and significance got lost along the way. I predict that 3 films should be more than enough to make a convincing adaptation. Just like their previous work, I was expecting Ufotable to add extra details and developments to the story, giving the films a definite chance of succeeding the source material. After having seen the film, these expectations were met in spades. For the material covered in the first film, I can safely say that Ufotable's adaptation is far more intense and compelling than the original novel. The sense of pacing, perspective, and presentation bring the images and text of the original to life in a way I didn't expect was even possible. Still, it was indeed possible, and we are blessed with a marvel in anime cinema. Ufotable's animation becomes more thorough, precise, and spectacular with each outing, and Presage Flower stands at the peak of their achievement. It takes you through all the necessary events, with enough new twists and flourishments that it all comes off as greatly refreshing, especially when it comes to some added fight scenes. They're great because they allow for nearly every servant to have their glory, regardless of their fate in the war. For both the extreme and the subtle, Ufotable grabs your heart and doesn't let go. Going in, there were a few things I was curious about regarding how they'd approach the adaptation. Firstly, the pacing. If you've played the visual novel, then you know you won't be able to play Heaven's Feel without already playing through both Fate and Unlimited Blade Works. It was written with the expectation that you already know a lot about the story. Furthermore, the novel lets you skip previously read text, which helps because there are moments at the beginning of each route that overlap. In terms of coverage, We already had 2 hours of prologue material from Unlimited Blade Works between Rin and Shiro's introductions. Just how much of that old ground would the film have to tread on to catch us up to the deviating plotline? The answer is actually a combination of elements. While the basic events are the same, Shiro recklessly staying too late at school and getting skewered by Lancer, there was a great deal of exposition regarding Sakura that had surprisingly never been animated before. The film definitively shows how Shiro and Sakura meet, as well as how their relationship builds up before the Fifth Grail War. The novel's expository descriptions become dramatic and stunning visual glimpses into their past. These developments serve as the beginning for the film. The events we're already familiar with are loosely montaged and intercut with material surrounding Sakura. Thus, just like the visual novel, these Heaven's Feel movies absolutely require you to have knowledge of Unlimited Blade Works to get the full experience. Honestly, I doubt I could come up with a better solution myself. Not that I'd need to. Nothing felt off about the film's intro at all. Another point of curiosity for me was the way the films would be distributed. Would each film be able to stand out on its own? Obviously, each one is only going to tell part of the otherwise full story, but would each film have a satisfying build-up and resolution, at least emotionally? For Presage Flower 1, I can definitely say yes. In fact, I was surprised by just how much the film was able to cover in its first outing. While not covering the entire plot, the film's ending is set as a nice break in the events where the plot can rest, leading to an emotional breathing point. You don't get the sense that it ends up on some cheap cliffhanger. Lastly, I was curious to see how the films would handle the sexual content inherent in the Heaven's Feel route. While the infamous sex scenes in Fate and Unlimited Blade Works can be rewritten as different magic rituals, the sexual themes in Heaven's Feel are actually part of the story. So far, these adaptations all use the Rialta Nua story, which is the home console port of the visual novel that gets rid of all the outright hentai scenes. I'd never played the novel with this censorship, so I couldn't use that for reference going in. All things considered, I was really impressed by how these mature themes were handled in Presage Flower. There is no outright nudity, but the film doesn't try to avoid the novel's unnerving eroticism either. Again, I applaud Ufotable's discretion. By now I feel I should have convinced you to want to see this cinematic masterpiece. It was every bit as great as I anticipated, and then some. It's genuinely one of the best anime movies, period. With that out of the way, I want to enter some spoiler territory for those who may have already seen the film, or simply don't mind being spoiled. This is to point out specific changes and design choices between the visual novel and film. Thus, if you do not want to be spoiled, leave now. Spoiler warnings all around. We good? Alright, let's continue. For one, I love how the film bridges the gap for Sakura between Fate Zero and Stay Night. This girl, cruelly molded into a mage via horrendous creatures, is left cold and uncaring, almost exclusively duty-bound. Those vacant eyes of hers are really saddening. By showing her days taking care of an injured Shiro, they inject enough humor and charm to emphasize how this one boy is literally giving her life back. The light returns to her eyes, and she finds true happiness where she otherwise had no hope. I also love how they show Shiro's nearly flawless technique in the archery club. It helps us respect him right off the bat for his talents, as well as sets him apart from all the other characters. The way the film handles his personality is actually my favorite portrayal of him thus far. We aren't treated to any internal monologues, which is what people often say is a problem for fleshing out his character. But I feel that all of the film's non-verbal moments actually do a better job communicating who he is. Nasu's writing often gets too expository and explanative, whereas the film conveys personality and motive much more eloquently. Holy shit, the moment when Shiro meets Zoken for the first time, and we hear the slithering of worms from the depths of the Mato basement, is genuinely sickening. The film also humanizes Shinji a lot more. He's still the same jerk as always, but we do get a sense of his desires and struggles, which all around make him a richer character. I love how they show him at the end of the movie, doing his own research into magic, much like Waver Velvet did in Zero. It shows that despite his handicap, he actually does have conviction to get better, all on his own. The film definitely covers all the important events, but it has a knack for chaining them together with less breathing room between. Shiro literally walks out of the church after being initiated by Kirei, and immediately faces off against Ilya right outside the church gates. While it's amazing that we finally see how gruesome it is when Shiro leaps in the way of Berserker's blade to save Saber, It's baffling that his wounds literally heal in the same night, allowing him to get up and keep fighting. I'm pretty sure his confrontation with Shinji and Ryder doesn't happen during the same night he summons Saber. Also, I remember Saber defeating Ryder without much effort, but damn do they make her a badass in this fight. The way they place this moment of badass, along with Shinji's overcompetent, stupid embarrassment, is brilliant. It had the whole theater laughing. Setting it in an alleyway also was a nice touch. It was cool actually seeing how Ryder drains people's mana, as well as showing how Mitsuzuri wound up in the alley in the first place. I was glad to see the dream sequence carried out with all the sexual tension it deserves. The version I read was definitely a full-on sex scene, but I see how that's not entirely necessary. One thing I was disappointed in, however, was how Kojiro Sasaki was killed off immediately. They skip the build-up in that scene, where Zoken interferes. Instead, it makes it seem like he could have had his chest burster scene in any of the other routes as well. They ignore the causality and it comes off as pretty random. That said, True Assassin was handled wonderfully. His gestures and movements are all very expressive and wild. Whatever issues I had with the Sasaki scene were overshadowed by the craziness of Medea's assassination. We don't get to see much of her, but her screen time is very emotional and tragic. It's wild seeing what could otherwise be a dangerous opponent be taken advantage of by circumstance. I was also impressed by how they were able to present Reen as a reliable and lovable character, despite her limited screen time. On to Lancer. Considering he doesn't last very long in this plot route, it's nice to see him get some extra embellishment in his extended fight scene with Hassan. My only concern is that the driver of the truck they fight on is a total moron. You'd think the truck driver would notice the fight and the fact that some of his cars are missing. It's also a bit far-fetched that their inner-city fight occurred without inciting tons of witnesses. Regardless, suspending your disbelief a bit longer is worth it for the intensity of their bout. I was much more convinced by Lancer's struggle against the Shadow, with him doing quite a bit more to resist. Oh, and seeing Hassan's Zabaniya in animation was bone-chilling. In contrast, the scene with Kotomine at the curry restaurant is absolutely perfect. The comedic relief was superb. The close-ups of his mouth and him zipping down his jacket make the scene so uncomfortably hilarious. On that note, the film is amazing at balancing intense moments with comedy. The roller coaster of emotions is real. Gilgamesh, for instance, is able to generate laughs with literally his only line in the entire film, which makes fun of Shiro for being embarrassed about looking at a high schooler's breasts. Archer also has a great one-liner. After his first encounter with Zoken and the Shadow, he simply remarks that he'll have to put his personal business aside for that moment. The dramatic irony was enough to once again fill the theater with laughter. Also, the Shadow is fucking creepy in this film, especially when it moves. You don't get that sense of uncanny motion in the visual novel. It's also eerie as hell when it gets its own shot in the snow, with near absolute silence. Lastly, we have the one scene that was inevitable, Artoria being corrupted by the Shadow and transforming into Saber Alter. The entire trap is hard to watch, with Artoria being unable to fight off either it or Hassan. In particular, I absolutely love and hate seeing Artoria floating in the void, desperately trying to reach the root, only to be pulled back by her own alter form. Her transformation is played up much more in the film, and I find that wonderful, albeit all the more tragic. Knowing she's not going to be one of the good guys anymore, I appreciate the moments of beauty she has in this film, as a fan service of sorts. Well, there you have it, my impressions of the nearly perfect film adaptation of Heaven's Feel. I'll be sure to cover the last two films in the trilogy as they come out. For now, look forward to more Fate lore in addition to our other content. If you enjoyed this video, consider becoming a patron of the channel. I genuinely need support from viewers like you in order to expand the channel as my full-time career. Regardless, feel free to subscribe for more anime lists, reviews, discussions, lore videos, let's plays, and more holy waifu wars. Until next time, celebrate your fandom.